From our studios in Los Angeles and Tampa, this is Green Tagged Theme Park in 30, where we take the top theme park news from each week and explain why it matters to you. Today, we're going to be talking about DeSantis and Disney Part 2 or 3, or the ongoing saga, this week's episode of DeSantis and Disney. So the story broke last week. It was obviously the biggest news from last week, but we wanted to wait until this week because we knew that more details would come out, and they have. So we're going to start off this episode. I'm going to give a little background and outline this big steps at play here so that we don't get anything wrong. And then Scott and I will discuss. So to give the context, as we discussed previously, when it first broke, Disney sided against Florida's Don't Say Gay bill. And in response, DeSantis signed a separate bill that took control of the special tax zone encompassing Walt Disney World. The new Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, which really needs an acronym, comprised of 5 DeSantis allies, would serve to take over the new municipal services and development for the land, and basically also serve as a moral arbiter for the Disney company. So that was the previous story that broke. And when that news broke, we did a whole podcast. Well, not a whole podcast. We did a lengthy discussion about that and what Disney was going to do and how come they were staying silent. And that's what broke last week, is the reason that Disney was staying silent. Because 19 days before DeSantis signed that new bill to move over the Oversight Committee, the old board had signed agreements with Disney, essentially stripping the new board of power and handing that power back to Disney. So it's called the Declaration of Restrictive Covenants, and the measure allows Disney to have the final say on any alterations to the property and requires the board to inform Disney of plans for such alterations without conditions or delays. The declaration will continue until 21 years after the death of the last survivor of the descendants of King Charles III. So what has come to more light now in the past week is that this whole process was done above board and very publicly. So the declaration was public to anyone that was really paying attention to the process. A detailed note about the restrictive covenant clause was recorded in the February 8th Reedy Creek agenda and all the meeting minutes. And all those documents are available online with no public records access needed. You can just go online and read about the discussion of this covenant and the voting for that. So the restrictive covenant is binding, meaning Disney could easily sue the board now for legal damages if it tries to overstep its powers and its oversight. So that was last week. So what has happened this week is that now the DeSantis-aligned board has agreed to hire 4 law firms whose fees will be paid by the tax revenues that Disney is generating. And on Monday, during the annual shareholder meeting, Bob Iger said the Walt Disney Company plans to invest $17 billion in Walt Disney World over the next 10 years and create 13,000 new jobs. He was asked specifically about this disagreement just this week, and he took a pretty hard swing. He said, "Our point on this is that any action that thwarts those efforts simply to retaliate for a position the company took sounds not just anti-business, but it sounds anti-Florida." And I'll just leave it at that. Of course, not to be outdone, on Thursday, DeSantis had a speech at a college, and he vowed to kind of void the declaration, adding, "We're not just going to void the development agreement they tried to do. We're going to look at things like taxes on the hotels. We're going to look at things like tolls on the roads. We're going to look at things like developing some of the property that the district owns." So that's where we are. We went from really understanding why Disney didn't do anything because they had already made a move that was public and people really probably should have caught it, but kind of overlooked it. So Disney effectively stripped the board of its power before they were able to take control. But then this week, of course, the saga continues. Disney seems like they're taking a much more pointed, that's pretty pointed to basically saying that DeSantis is anti-Florida when he is the governor of Florida. So they're taking a stance. And of course, DeSantis is never going to back down, and he is hiring legal teams and blah, 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 blah. Oh my gosh. So, Scott.
Well, first, let me clarify. I'm not in Tampa right now.
Oh, did I say Tampa? Oh,
I'm sorry. So I just want to clarify that only because being outside of Tampa, I am not sitting in this boiling cesspool of crap that's going on in Florida. I'm sitting in a different boiling location. I'm still in Abu Dhabi, but So I'm not quite as in the thick of things as I normally would be for something that is this Florida centric. However, none of this surprises me in the least. I think that all too often we have found ourselves in a battle of one versus another. And we're not looking at what is best for the constituents. We're looking about what I can claim as a victory when it comes to politics, when it comes to business. I think I can't say that I have always agreed with Iger's statements in the past. Usually do, but not always. And in this particular case, though, this is clearly anti-business.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure I can go so far as to say anti-Florida, but I will say I think so. But I can't get completely on that bandwagon. But is it anti-business? Absolutely. And anybody who is supporting DeSantis in this, I want you to take a real hard look at this, because basically this is setting a precedent so that the government can take anything that a private company owns.
Yeah.
I want you to take a real hard look at this, because this is a very slippery slope. Now, I will also say that, and this is discussions, I know, Philip, you and I have had this offline, and I've had this discussion with other people. Don't go lawyering up against Disney, especially when it comes to entertainment law. And this kind of hospitality law and ownership law. They worked on the Reedy Creek development concept long before the park was even broken ground. So it's going to be interesting. The fact that DeSantis, let's break this down just a little bit. The fact that DeSantis is using the money that is being raised by the state of Florida by Disney to lawyer up against Disney, instead of taking that money and utilizing it to benefit the state of Florida. That's where I agree that his actions right now, short term, are anti-Florida. Whether it's anti-Florida long term, I don't know. I'm not that's out of my area of expertise. But short term, it appears to, based on this information, to definitely be anti-Florida, taking tax revenue that is generated by tourism, which is huge in Florida, and putting it in, investing it into not one, not two, not three, but 4 law firms to go against the entity that is generating this tax revenue. Help me explain how that is beneficial to the state of Florida.
Yeah.
And this is a point where we have to recognize the quote unquote moral, and I put that in quotes because I do not believe that his stance is moral, but he does. So we will put it there. This stance, which again, the amount of revenue generated by the people who are not only members of the LGBTQ plus community, but also allies of the LGBTQ plus community are huge, especially when it comes to tourism. So this could be a second basic stance that could be considered anti-Florida. But I'm curious. But and the interesting thing is, outside of the hospitality industry and the attractions industry, he is also pushing through and he's using Disney as a top line big, like, let's grab all the headlines kind of thing. What he's doing secretly is certain laws about how children can be taken from their parents if their parents help them identify their gender and educate them on what their gender is if it is not their assigned birth gender. So this is happening on many, many, many levels. And this is, like I said, a slippery and dangerous slope. I think that he is using Disney to put money in front of morality and to create a smokescreen. It is not just about Disney. That's the most important point that I want to make. As a Floridian, although I'm not there now, but as a Floridian, that's the most important point I want to make. This is not just about Disney. This is not just about theme parks. This is about the government taking control of private industry. And this is about the government taking away rights to the point where they can remove children from their parents' care if their parents provide them with education and support regarding gender, either reassignment or gender identification. So this does not sound like anything that is particularly American to me, or at least traditionally American. So let's just recognize that what we are seeing on the attraction side is just the surface of what is happening. And I would even venture to say there are even more insidious things happening below the surface. So I think we need to do everything we can to make certain that Disney as a private industry does not fall victim to a governmental ideology that is trying to take away not only their control, but it even says repurposing of land owned by the district.
Yeah.
The argument can be made in fairness, and those of you who disagree with what I've just said, in fairness, the argument can be made that Disney utilized the system to get home rule, to create Reedy Creek. They used the governmental system to their business advantage in the past. I do not deny that, but Walt Disney World would not exist if that did not happen. So, and did it benefit the state of Florida? Absolutely. Yeah. Did it benefit the city of Orlando? Absolutely. I visited Walt Disney World when it first opened, and Orlando was a town, not a city. It has basically built Orlando. It basically encouraged Universal to come to Orlando. It just continued to build the tourism industry in Central Florida exponentially. So, it is a scary thing. I think it's something we definitely need to keep an eye on. But I am glad. And you know me, I've not always supported Disney's actions wholeheartedly. But in this particular case, what's happening is wrong. And I'm glad to see that Disney is coming out swinging.
That was a lot. I think
it was a lot, but it's a lot of information.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I think I agree with the overall, one of your overall theses, which is this: there's a lot more under. This is kind of like by the time it gets to the tourism piece, that means that there's a lot happening that pushed it out that far. And I think, to me, that is also the most, I don't know even what to call the most dangerous, the most insidious, like the most I think everyone in our industry should be paying attention to this and just watching how Disney handles it, and I think pay more attention to what's going on in your local markets as well, because we would not want this to become a precedent or to become it's just not, It's so strange, It's just one of those things that is so strange to basically. The thing that jumped out to me in the escalations is that, originally DeSantis kind of made the argument that it was, I don't know. Basically, he was like, it's kind of unfair. Like Disney has an unfair advantage. Basically, it was his kind of like his original thing, but now it's very clear. I mean, in some of the statements he gave and in the speech as well, when he was questioned, I mean, he's drawn the parallel directly between Disney not supporting or coming out against the bill and then this. He's drawn it directly, and that to me was a big, because he hadn't previously, or I hadn't seen it as clear previously. We all kind of suspected, right? But to have it become part of the platform, to basically be like, if you are going to get in our way with legislation, then we're going to get in your way with what you're doing. So that's kind of like, I think that's very, that to me was surprising, and also something I think I think the tourism sector needs to rally, basically. And we need to be like, this is not okay, where we have people telling us private companies what type of entertainment we're allowed to offer. Like, that's just not that's not going to fly, kind of no matter how you slice it.
and who we're allowed to employ,
Yes.
and who we're allowed to provide insurance for, and who we're allowed to recognize as partners.
Let companies, private companies need to, companies need to stay private. I mean, we need to be allowed to, like, I don't know. Companies need to be allowed. I mean, again, the First Amendment type of things, like companies need to be allowed to do business the way that they want to do business. Again, if a company chooses to have value-based entertainment, which is totally fine, that's fine. But the company shouldn't be dictated to what kind of entertainment they're allowed to offer in their parks by the local government. That is definitely cause for alarm. And I guess what perked me up in this whole story was like, oh, he's not the line is being drawn almost directly that is what they're trying to do. Even in the statement saying that the committee was supposed to kind of be a moral check on a company. You don't need a moral check on a company. That's what laws are for. You know what I mean? There's
That's not free enterprise. That's not free enterprise. To quote what you said earlier, to serve as a moral arbiter.
What? Yeah. When the board said that in their statements, because kind of what happened is the board kind of met with had their second meeting, and basically they were like, well, we can't do anything based on what happened previously. That's the other thing that kind of, I'm not sure how much I buy, but it's another weird piece of the puzzle. Like, are you going to tell me that so much work went into crafting this and then nobody went to the meeting, of the group that they were going to take over? I mean, but I don't know. I'm glad this is Disney. Let me just say it that way. Like, Disney, if right. Someone has to deal with this in our industry to kind of put it, I'm glad it's them, because I really can't think of anything that Disney has done wrong here. And I even think it was appropriate for him to start. I even think it was appropriate for Iger to not really hit back, but to just kind of put it in that way, because to me, the other big takeaway I had from this is like, Disney really doesn't have anything to lose now, because they've secured what they can secure. So there's really not much stopping them from standing up more about what they, about what they want to be able to do. And I think that could be very detrimental, because Disney is arguably, right, like the best PR lobbying company in the world.
Yeah. Well, the other interesting thing is, I'm going to put this out. I am not stating this as fact, because I do not know, but I'm going to float this idea out there, and we'll see how it plays out. I would float the idea that this has nothing to do with Florida.
Yeah.
This is a way of DeSantis continuing to build
his brand,
promotional sound bites for his run for presidency.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see how it happens, and I think that it could be one of the most disastrous things he has done, because it could explode in his face. But I also can see that there are certain members, certain voters out there in a very vocal minority, but who will say, yes, he's showing he's strong, and he's going against these liberals, and he's going. So what I'm concerned about as a resident of the state of Florida, or permanent resident, not current, but as a permanent resident of the state of Florida, what I'm concerned about is, will Florida be left in the wake as DeSantis moves towards the presidency? I don't care what happens to Florida, as long as I can use it as a box checked to move towards the presidency. I don't know. Again, please do not get upset with me. Please do not send letters. I am not saying that is what is happening, but I just want to float that idea out there, because the way I put together stories, it could be a possibility, and it doesn't sound too far-fetched to me.
I think that sentiment is exactly what Iger was speaking to on the shareholder meeting. That's how I read that line. I read that line basically like, not just that we are here to stay and we're invested in Florida, like not just to underscore that, but also to, again, storytelling. That's what Disney does, right? They are sculpting us. Like previously it was like, we're all in this together. We're trying to make whatever. Now it's like, we're the opposite. they're starting to draw the characterizations between DeSantis and Disney, and they're basically saying we're invested in this country, or in this country and in this state for a long time, at least 10 years, and I have all this stuff and we have all this money plan. And that seems to directly parallel. It's like by saying that, they're implying the inverse of DeSantis. And he has not, he doesn't have anything to, like, what is he going to say? Right. There's nothing that and I think that was something else that a lot of not the shareholders, but also the bloggers and a lot of the news people took, was when they put out those numbers, because really that was really like the first time they've kind of given concrete-ish numbers and kind of like development plans for the area. And that was a big question. Even we asked it. We were talking about on previous shows, look at the expansion in Asia and UAE, and California. Like, how much is Disney really going to expand in Florida? How much can they expand in Florida? Like, how much, when are they going to tap out the market? Like, what's all this? And I think that statement said a lot. It said we're not done in this market. There's still plenty of room to grow, and that that's enough to build another gate as well. That's enough investment for that type of thing. So I think they were directly speaking to that sentiment.
Yeah, it's the moment this statement was made, everyone I know who works in the industry, and especially those who are Orlando based, immediately the first words out of their mouth was additional gate?
Yeah.
Question mark?
Yeah.
And if so, what would it be? And I know there's been a lot of speculation. There's been a couple of articles that have floated out there. Probably the most common rumor alert. This is not fact. Rumor alert is either the Pirates and Princess concept, which they've been testing as a special event for years, or the Villains Park, which has been in so very, very. It's been so very popular in as far as a conspiracy theory. So who knows? But as you say, Philip, the bottom line is he came out and he said, we are invested in Florida, not sure whether the current governor is.
Yeah. And that's a hard swing. And I think it's just going to get harder. And, I would not want to go up against the storytelling power of Disney. Like, I would not.
Clearly they are. When you say storytelling, it's funny because this could, and I don't mean to undermine the importance of it, but this particular story could play out very much like a Disney film where you've got this insidious villain who is trapped by their own vanity or desire for power or whatever. It's interesting.
Like, it is the Disney story, and I just feel like that is going to work against the people and against DeSantis in so many ways, because Disney has a lot of fans, and especially in that area, and they're good at telling that story, like that story, the like hero villain story. And if they can shift things around, Anyway, I wanted to wrap this up, this section, but I want to know, Scott, like, what do you think our listeners should do with this information? What do we do?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that, if this kind of thing can happen in Florida with Disney, which is supposedly untouchable, it can happen anywhere. So be involved, whether you are a major theme park or whether you are a family entertainment center, whether you are a zoo, be involved in your local politics, be aware of what's happening in your local politics, and don't just look at the things that you think are going to affect you directly. Look at the things that are lying beneath it. Because I think the most important thing, my most important takeaway in this story, as a Floridian, and I'm speaking very selfishly, as a Floridian, my basic takeaway is don't get caught up in the bluster that's covering the deeper and perhaps more insidious decisions that are being made underneath this. That's why I say be involved, get involved, whether it is getting involved with local government, whether it's getting involved with chambers of commerce. Be aware of the decisions that are being made, because whether you think they're going to affect you directly or not, who would have thought that the Don't Say Gay bill would have affected theme parks? Who?
Yeah.
But it's clearly making a big deal. So be involved, be aware.
Okay, well, we'll move on to the also Disney story, but different on the staffing end. Meanwhile, while all this is also happening, Disney has eliminated its metaverse department as part of a broader restructuring that is expected to reduce headcount by around 7,000 across the company over the next 2 months. They had previously announced that 7,000 person layoff, which we did cover, but the new piece about this is they've eliminated entirely the metaverse section. But of course, those layoffs are not touching the parks, as we have talked about a lot on the show. Disney and the unions have agreed on a new contract. This is courtesy of the Orlando Sentinel. The proposal will raise Disney's minimum wage for full-time workers from $15 an hour to $17 immediately. The rate will increase to $18 in December and $20.50 by the contract's end in 2026. It also introduces 8 weeks of paid child bonding leave. The deal makes Disney the highest paying theme park employer in Orlando. Universal Orlando raised its starting wages to $17 an hour earlier in February when they were still negotiating this contract. Disney World's frontline staff say this pay increase will make a big difference in their lives. In recent years, some workers have reported sleeping in their cars, living in motels, or sharing small apartments with multiple roommates to make ends meet. So there's also a lot there. I think for me, the big takeaway is, God, we just talked about it with the IAPA North America Summit, right? Like the metaverse, all that kind of died quickly. And I think the reason, it may not be completely dead, but it's more like the arrival of a much greater AI and much more access to AI is changing what that whole thing is going to be. And it's pretty clear that it's more going to be like the internet, as in things are going to operate in the background as part of infrastructure that we use. And so we are yet back to content is king. And I think that is clear. At Iger said as much. He said about restructuring to put the artists more accountable for their work and putting them closer to the stories and distribution and get rid of the metaverse. Why? Because it doesn't matter. Because if they make incredible content, whoever owns the quote unquote metaverse or whatever that ends up being will come to them anyway to lease their characters, just like they have always done. So I think that's pretty thing. And then, the other big thing is the staffing arms race. And I'm not quite sure right now how we're going to fit 1 to potentially 2 new theme parks in Orlando with the staffing being this bad.
Yeah, I think that is very accurate. For me, metaverse, I go back and listen to old episodes.
Right?
I was never a fan. Just saying, I was never a fan, and I thought it was just because I was old. I was a fan, I wasn't a fan, but for the wrong reasons, and I admit that. But I always said theme parks need to continue to focus on creating live, in-person experiences, not things that happen out here, but things that happen right here, right now. That's been the purpose of theme parks from the get-go. That's why Disneyland was created, was to give people an opportunity to take things from the movies into the real world. It also ties directly in line with our whole big discussion that we had not too long ago about authentic reality. I think that the idea of, the metaverse, it's great in theory. Mm-hmm. It's really great in theory. And honestly, its time may come. We may reach that point, but we ain't there yet. And I think that people who are living a whole generation or multiple generations that are living on their phones and living in their digital world, what are they going to do when they want to get away, when they want to have a vacation? They're going to go to something real and use it to create content for their digital world. So you need that touch point in reality. And to eliminate the metaverse, for Disney to eliminate the metaverse, their metaverse department, makes total sense, because as Philip just pointed out, if you create great content, if you create wonderful, impactful in-person experiences, no matter what the technology is, then the metaverse will follow. I mean, the rest of the internet and the other content creators, and they will all come back to that touch point. But in order for content to be created that is viable, how many of us, when we get locked into that TikTok loop or the social media loop where we get stuck just watching videos, none of them, or very small percentage of them, are CGI. Mm-hmm. They're all capturing the cute dog. They're all capturing the kids who are dancing. They're all capturing they're all real things. They're all live things. And I think it only makes sense to continue in that regard, making it easy for people to put it, to translate it into digital. But everybody has the ability to do that now. Everyone can make digital content. Not everybody can make real, in-person, impactful experiences. Sometimes it's fun to be right. It happens so rarely. Yeah, I don't know whether I'm right or not, but at least I'm loud, and and I get it. I have this great opportunity to have these discussions with Philip and to share our thoughts with you. But unfortunately, we can only do it at about 30 minutes at a time, and those 30 minutes are up. So until next time, on behalf of Philip Hernandez and myself, Scott Swenson, this is Green Tag Theme Park in 30, and we will see you next week.